sure that you count that extra one. So 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. It's always subtract plus 1. So that you don't fall into that, subtract two consecutive intervals, either their beginning parts or their end parts. And you'll find your class width. To find your midpoint of the class, add it up, midpoint halfway through, add it up, divide by 2. From this point, you can add 11. Add 11 all the way, oops, this is frequency. Add 11, all the way down. You can add your class width all the way down for your midpoints. You don't have to do each individual midpoint. And your class boundaries, say drop the low end by 0.5, raise the higher end by 0.5. You're taking up the gap between. They're now continuous from here to here. See it? There's no gap anymore. The bars will be continuous when you do your bars. Everyone okay with this one? Your cumulative frequency, you didn't have to do a cumulative frequency. I know, but not for this assignment. You didn't have to. Start with your lowest one and just keep adding. Add 43, add 68. That's a really high one. You got a lot to add. But you didn't have to do that for this one. Okay. The second one, this one does look a little bit strange in your boundary. Again, class width between any two consecutive intervals. The lower end or the upper end. So your class width is 10. Your midpoint, take your first class, 0 plus 9 divided in 2, 4.5, add 10 all the way down. All the way down. Now your class boundaries, yeah, it has a negative here. If you take 0 and you subtract 0.5, you get a negative. We're still going to graph this in quadrant 1. We're just going to break this graph and start it at negative 0.5. You're not going to come into the other axis. In other words, your negative should be here on this side. But we're not going to do that because technically my graph should be my first quadrant. But it just has a little bit of an overlap into that area. We're going to do their graphs today. Most of them are going to use midpoints, so we can kind of get around that. Only when you have to do a class boundary do you have a little bit of trouble. So is everybody okay finding these pieces? Class width is the most important. You have to be able to take your highest and your lowest entry, subtract it, divide it by how many classes, round up, that's your class width. So bless you. So when you go down here, there's your class width. It separates down here. Good? Okay. Today we're going to hit your frequency histogram, your frequency polygon, and your relative frequency. Now, I'm going to give you a piece of graph paper. Just fold lengthwise over. Just go like this. Crease it over. You'll get 4 sections. So you'll get 4 sets of graphs that we're going to do with the same exact data. 1, 2, 3, 4. Today we'll probably hit 3 of them. Now, on page 44, this is your frequency histogram. This is the same as your bar graph that you know and love for all these years. You took your frequency and you made it into a bar graph. Now, your horizontal axis, your x-axis, is where your classes go. This is where your class goes. We can either put the midpoint there, or we can put the upper class boundary here. If you look at the graph below it, on page 44, the one to the left, they put their midpoint. The one to the right, they put the upper class boundary. Can you tell any difference between the graphs? Otherwise, other than the x-axis labeled, they look exactly the same. I use the midpoint. And when we do the next graph, you pretty much have to use the midpoint, so it kind of makes it flow a little bit better. I use the midpoint. Can you use the upper class boundary? Absolutely. The upper class boundary, if you notice, in the first one though, on the right, on the lower right, their first upper class boundary was 104.5. They had to drop it down to use their lower class boundary. Otherwise, they're kind of like this, a label there. You don't have that problem with the midpoints. You just have it with the class boundaries. You have to kind of either drop it or raise it. So I use the midpoints on these. Your vertical, your y-axis is where your frequency goes. Your bars must touch. There's no gap between the bars. Sometimes we cut the graph when we start. They have a cut in theirs. They cut it because it doesn't start at 0. Technically, your graphs come from here. The 0 is in the middle. We only use quadrant 1. This still starts at 0. Generally, your frequency goes from 0 to whatever the highest happens to be, but this doesn't always. So we put a little cut in your graph rather than have that wasted space. Okay? And remember also, you need a title. Every graph needs a title and label all axes. You're going to put a title. These are in your class notes as well. Label it, title it. Okay? Whether you use your boundaries or your midpoints, there's no gaps between your bars. And that's probably one of the graphs you're familiar with, is your bar graph, right? You've been doing your bar graph for a long time. You just used to do underneath it, like here, you just would say this, like 0 to 9, 10 to 19. We don't do that part anymore. First of all, it takes a lot of space, a lot of writing in it, especially when your numbers are pretty large and your bars are a little narrower. It makes it easier to look at the midpoint or look at the boundary for this. So we're going to take this and we're going to do one for your data that you collected. And this was your top 50 women's ages in the world in 2012. In 2012. Remember we collected your data, we made this table together? We're going to make your 4 graphs based on your data. So the first thing you're going to do is, in the top part of your graph is make me an axis like this. Use the whole top part of your graph paper. When you folded it, just go by the lines. We don't have to be that exact. Make it in the top part. Ricky, question?
Yeah, just anywhere right here?
No. Go like this and make it using most of your graph paper.
Yes, ma'am.
And let's give it a title.
No, but I'm sorry.
Use your lines that are there. Now, we're cutting our graph down here, so give me a good amount of space to cut your graph. Give me a couple of boxes. We're going to need those little extra boxes later. Just like make this cut go a couple of boxes. Now, we have to put 7 classes. We have 7 entries in our table. If you forget how to do this, you can count the boxes you have, divide by 7. Then you know how many you can make each one. You don't want to make them all like 5 and then say, oops, I only have 3 left for the last one. They have to be the same. If 3 looks reasonable, go 3. You also don't want your graph to come on this little piece over here. Here's all my graphs, here's all my bars right here, and I have all that space. Use your space. It's nice to be able to use your space. Rule of thumb, count your classes, and divide that, and count your boxes out, and divide it by 7. So, however you can make me 7 classes. Right now, I want you to fill out the whole bar like this. Okay? Okay, it should be evenly spaced apart. There's your 7 classes. Now, if you wanted to use your upper class boundary, this is where your upper class boundary is, right here. So we would use, let's, 34 point, that says 34.5. And you would have to drop this down to 25.5. That's all I'm going to put for your class boundaries because I'm going to use the midpoint for this. But if you used your boundaries, that's where they go. Well, I only labeled your upper class and your lower class on one section because I'm really going to use your midpoints. But you can use your upper class boundary. The problem is, Angela, this guy over here has to use the first boundary because then he wouldn't have a label. And then you can use your uppers on all of them. Now, the midpoints. Make me a midpoint line through all of these. We're going to put your midpoints here. You don't have to use both, only one or the other. So we're going to follow your midpoints. 30, 39, they go by 9s. I only did the upper class so that you'd see where it goes, but I'm using midpoints on mine. So do you want me to erase these boundaries? I'll erase them. I just wanted you to see where they went if you wanted to use them. I'm going to use the midpoints on mine. And we're going to label this classes. Now, your y-axis has to go from 0 to the highest frequency, which is 18. So that you're not leaving your graph at the very top, go to 20. And again, rule of thumb, count the boxes. Divide by 20. If you have 40 boxes, you can do every 2. If you don't, go every 1. If you want to go every 3, 5, try that. Like if you can go 3, this has to start at 0. If you can go 3 and go by 5s, this is fine too. Make them evenly spaced apart. If it only brings you there, go further apart. You want your graph to use this whole space in here. See this whole space wasted? You want your graph to use the whole thing. So count the boxes before you do this. What I don't want to see is this. I get all the way up to here, and I'm all the way up to here on 15, and then I have to say 20's over here, and my 10 is over here. I don't want this. Okay, because you had to cram it in at the end. They have to be evenly spaced apart. And that includes your first one. Your first one can't be sitting at that axis. It has to be equally spaced apart. Mine are obviously not because I have nothing to count here. So you're going to count your boxes. Yeah. Yes. Whatever you can fit on your axis. If you can say like go every 3, 5, because if you can, or if you can't, you don't have 40 spaces, you have 40 spaces? No, so you're probably a little left. So probably every 3 you can hit 5. Count before you write them in. Does it give you a good enough part of your graph? Because you only have to go up to 20. Count them. Now, we're going to make your bars. Your bars go up to your frequency. We're going to call this guy frequency. Label that frequency. This, make sure your midpoint is in the middle of your bars. Then 5. Then 12. Yours should look a little nicer because mine's kind of freehand up here. And I'm horrible at freehand. Now, if you noticed before, the other graph, they put the numbers right on top. If you like to, put the numbers on top. I find you need the numbers when you really won't be able to even guess closely what it is. So if you want to put your numbers on top of your bar, you can absolutely put them here. These aren't that bad. These aren't that bad spaced apart, so you can pretty much guess what they are. if you're on graph paper, you can almost see it on the graph paper, especially if you did like a one-to-one. Now, the reason we shade is, especially when you have graph paper, you write your bars on the lines of the graph paper. And the bar is filled in with grid, just like the rest of it is. So we shade to make it stand out. So it kind of stands out of your page now. Okay. And using your graphic organizer, it gives you a better feel for where your data is. Like, it's almost symmetrical, but I do see my bars a little bit more on the left-hand side. So my ages might have been a little bit younger than they were older, right? A little bit more towards the younger, towards the middle side. I can see approximately, like, the highest port is my 57. That seemed to be the highest midpoint of my frequencies. I only have one person out here in the 84, one person in the 75. I can tell my lowest came, you know, within this area. Within this, I don't know the exact number, but I know for my midpoint side. I know I have 2 that fall in the 30 area, and I have 5 that fall in the 39 area. So it kind of gives me a better glance at what I'm looking at. Your frequency polygon, if you follow along on page 45, on their data that they use for their histogram, this is their frequency polygon. And if you take a look at it, they use their midpoints mostly. See their midpoints there? And they have a line graph. Now, look up here 1 second. This is where their midpoints came from. Don't do it on yours, but watch on mine. Every midpoint, they put a dot. And their frequency polygon came from here. They connected in line segments all their midpoints. But you notice what's going to happen. I'm not going to have a beginning, and I'm not going to have an end. It's going to kind of hang on my graph paper. So we're just going to have to extend this midpoint one less. So in this cut zone somewhere, I'm going to take 9 away from here so that I could extend my midpoint. In this zone over here, I'm going to add 9 to here and extend my midpoint. Now your graph starts and stops on the x-axis. It's not hanging up on your page. So do you see the difference here? So when we do your next graph, we're going to have enough to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 midpoints. We're going to have to make 9 midpoints on your graph. You're going to do the same exact graph as this. It's going to have the same exact frequency laid out. And if you can fit it in here, if that works out evenly spaced apart, you can absolutely move it to the left and move it to the right for your midpoints. So label your next one right underneath it. Just about the same, but make sure you can fit 9 midpoints there. If you have enough space between here and here, then use the same exact one. You can probably cut it a little bit. I said give yourself a big cut on that one. That's why I said give it a big cut. So if you can put your cut down real small and put your midpoint in there, then do it that way. So label your axes, same way as this. So your frequency polygon, guys, is going to have the same setup that you did before, but now it's just going to start 1 less midpoint. Instead of 30, drop it down. And here you ended at 84, just go up 1 more. Because This is going to be the exact same. We didn't change this. Oh, my pen. Thank you. Wow, I'm surprised it worked for me. Okay, so now you're putting dots here at the 2, at the 5, at the 12, 18, thank you, 11, 1. Good. Now, watch what happens. When you do this, there's segments. Don't make them smooth. The reason you do this is because in business sometimes they want to see the steepness of your graph. The bar shows the drop, but the line segment shows a steeper drop. Like when you drop from here to here, that bar went from here to here. Yeah, the bar was less, but it looks like a steeper line. Like you can see the bigger drop in the line segment. And because these hang up here, this is why they have to go this way. Don't forget to label this. This is still frequency, and these are the top 50 women's ages in 2012. Okay? Now, it's the same, it should have the same overall look as yours, midpoints. If you use your upper class boundary, and you can, then you already have the lower boundary. You just have to add one more upper boundary. But I like the midpoints because you're going to the middle of your bars. So it kind of makes more sense. Good? Questions? This is probably one you haven't seen. And see histogram. Now, if I can go backwards. Yes. Here's your histogram. I want you to look at page 44 and look at 46 and look and compare those two bar graphs. What can you tell me about the comparison of those two bar graphs? Ricky, what can you tell me, Ricky? Well, then look at it. Leave your shoes alone. Look at page 44 and look at page 46. Okay, what can you tell me about those bar graphs?
They're different.
How?
These are wider.
They're wider. Okay. What accounts for them being wider?
Instead of from going by whole numbers, they're going by decimals and the
Their y-axis, yeah, their y-axis is going by decimals instead of whole numbers. But what accounts for the bars being wider?
box where you go with the midpoints and out of the boundaries.
Okay, the boundaries and the midpoints. And what about the space, though? What about the space? Ah, it has more space on the graph to use, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The graph space is bigger. So that accounts for just the bars being wider. So the bars are a little wider because they have more space to use, which, right, wouldn't yours look a little bit narrow if you used the same space, but you had to make me 9 of them instead of 7 of them, whatever we had, right? So were your bars a little bit narrower, a little bit wider between yours? Well, it was hard to tell because you put dots. But the only difference here, like Angela said, is the frequency. The shape of the bars. Isn't the shape of your graph exactly the same? Okay? This is your relative frequency graph. It has the same look as your bar graph, but the only difference is right here. This is going to be relative frequency. So we're going to go back and make an axis, and you can use either your upper class or your midpoint. If you look to the left, they use their midpoint. I like my midpoint because we already did the midpoint. I think when you keep everything similar, it works better. So go back to the midpoint, 30, 39, 48, 57, 66, 75, 84. Remember, these are your classes. This is now called your relative frequency. This is your column for your relative frequency. Looks like money, doesn't it? 0.10. So label it like money. What's the highest amount that I see in my relative frequency? 36? Think of it like 36 cents. I need to label from 0 to 40 cents. Okay, give me 1 more minute, guys. From 0 to 40 cents. So maybe again, I can go every 5 cents, but a little bit less. Make sure you use money for this. Hang on. Okay. What you're going to do is finish this one for homework. Finish it for homework. Label it and put your bars. All you're going to do is put your bars from your graph. Ricky, stay with me a minute. This is your midpoint.
We only have to go to 20.
You have to go to 40 because this is your relative frequency. Keep going with this. Wait, give me 1 second. Hold on.
Good morning. Today is B-Day. Mr. Tyler Reed. Mr. Cruz's office, Corey Piccolo, Kaylee Cologne, Elijah Gabriel, and Amaya Jacob. Against Mr. Cruz,